FP Geeks is proud to present this week's Geek of the Week, Brian Gray.
Very good, Eric. How are you?
Good. Where have I caught you? I suppose you're in Ohio.
In Ohio, Milan, Ohio, not too far from Sandusky. A lot of people know this area because of Cedar Point is pretty well world-renowned as like the world's greatest roller coaster park. Oh. And if that doesn't tell, then on the north end of the state, right on Lake Erie. So between Cleveland and Toledo, how's that?
Perfect. Now, I've always thought it was Milan, but you said Milan.
You know what? I have no idea. When I moved here, I really wasn't sure how to pronounce it. I think that I also said Milan, but everyone that lives around us says Milan, so I started saying Milan. So
yeah, you have to do that. That's like Arizona. There's a town in Arizona called Prescott, but don't say Prescott if you go there because everybody says Prescott, and they get highly offended if you say Prescott.
I had no idea.
For future reference. I suppose we should mention that we're doing this in video.
Yes.
By your insistence, almost your insistence, you turned me on to the software that will make this possible, and we're actually having a face-to-face conversation, and we're hoping to get this up as a Geek of the Week interview in video. We'll see how that goes. It's looking very good on my end. Yeah.
One thing worth noting, I think that just so people know, we are using FaceTime, which is like a Skype type of program for Apple. And if we step on each other during the conversation, it's not either of us being rude. It's just that because there's a little bit of a delay. And sometimes I think when you hear a recording of two people on FaceTime, you think, gosh, he can't even get a point out because the other guy's just stepping all over him. Well, we've got a little bit of a delay. So please bear with us if we sound like we're rude with each other. Really, we're great friends, I promise.
And maybe by the end of the video, we'll have figured out our delay and can work around it.
All righty.
Since you're in Ohio, what's the weather like?
Actually, today was unseasonably wonderful.
What does that mean for you?
54, 55.
We were in the 70s here in Southern California, so that would be really cold for us.
Well, normally this should be below freezing. You know, like there's always, I have a furnace out in the shop, but I also have a wood burning stove. And by the end of the day, the stove was getting real. It was really cooking the shop. And even though I cut back on the wood, so today was unseasonably, it felt like spring. Like we almost opened up the windows, which would be unheard of at this time of month.
In January.
Or this time.
This time of year, yeah. So, since I have you here, tell me all about yourself. Who is Brian Gray?
It's a broad question. Pen maker. I really enjoy photography, but I suppose I would put, father and husband, of course, above those two. I guess that's a broad answer to a broad question. So
where are you from?
I think
originally, where are you from?
Mount Vernon, Ohio.
Okay, so you're from Ohio and you're still living in Ohio. Have you ever left the state?
Have I ever left the state as a resident?
As a resident, lived somewhere else?
No. Well, I was born in Kettering, Ohio, which is not far from Dayton, and then I don't even have memories there. We moved when I was pretty young to a town called Wadsworth, and then we moved to Mount Vernon, and that's where I consider myself to be raised. I was there since third grade. College took me to Bowling Green State University, also in Ohio, and then after school, I got a job doing pharmaceutical sales, and they said, move to Sandusky, and I moved to Sandusky, and then Milan is a little tiny town just south of Sandusky, so I still kind of consider myself a native of Sandusky, if you will, or at least I consider my area right now to be the Sandusky area. Milan is like a little teeny tiny town that's just south of Sandusky.
And when you say little teeny tiny town, what's the population of Milan?
I don't, we're actually not even in the city. We're in the township. There's one stoplight. So how's that?
Wow. And I suppose you like it there.
We do. It's the setup that we have is ideal. We're in somewhat of a development in the fact that we live in a neighborhood where, there's houses all in a row, and it's called Edison Ridge is the name of our development. But each house has a full acre. So it's not like our neighbors are right on top of us. Our neighbors are very friendly, but our house that we had in Sandusky, the homes were 10 feet away from each other as opposed to where we are now. We're not out in the country. We kind of have the best of both worlds. We've got a full acre to ourselves. We still have neighbors. We still live in a neighborhood, but we're also a little bit away. from busyness and activity. And put it to you this way: when we leave the house, usually the doors are unlocked. Huh?
Wow,
So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a neat little area.
Really wonderful. You know, I don't think you'll find anywhere in California like that. 1 acre, to somebody who may not know what an acre is, sounds like a lot, a huge amount of space, but it's good. It's a good barrier, but your neighbors are still your neighbors. It's not like you have to hike 10 miles to get to your neighbor.
Precisely.
Right.
Yep.
So it's a very comfortable place.
It's perfect for us.
And so tell us about the family.
My wife, Andrea, she actually is a very integral part of the business as well. She's out there full time with me. And then we have a 6-year-old named Andrew, who we just put to bed right now. He is in kindergarten and doing very, very well in school. His teachers are real happy. And he also loves pens, too.
Really? I wonder where he got that from.
I have no idea. He'll go out to the shop, and he loves being out in the shop, which is neat. And of course, I have like some scrap bins where, let's say that I make a part and, oh geez, it's the wrong color. Well, I'll throw that into my part bin, and maybe I'll pick it up later if I need that color some other day. Well, Andrew's notorious for going into that parts bin and making his own Franken pens. He'll grab a barrel and a cap and a section and throw a nib on it and ask me to ink it up, and he has a blast with it. He really loves, is it Noodler's Ghost or Noodler's, what's the Noodler's ink that is an invisible ink?
The invisible ink, I'm not sure what, I think it is Ghost, but...
I think it's Noodler's Ghost. He loves that. He writes secret notes to his grandparents, and then you have to use the UV light to read it, you know? That's super cool for him.
Well, that would be super cool for me, too. I have to get some of that ink.
You have to check it out.
So you mentioned photography, and of course,
yeah.
I've seen enough of your photos to know that you must be really into photography because they're so nice. How did you get into photography?
You know, it's interesting because the way that my personality works and the way that I approach hobbies is, I find something that I really, really like to do, and then I'm totally, totally engrossed with it. You know, for instance, we'll cover this more, but essentially pen making spawned from woodworking, marquetry furniture, wood turning, and that kind of brought me to pens. And quite honestly, I used to be completely laser focused on woodworking and marquetry furniture and wood turning. And then pens kind of took over on that because I started making a living with pens. And so I didn't have time for the woodworking. And now the photography is really kind of the same way. I mean, really, I've only been doing photography seriously for about a year, maybe a year and a half. I got my first DSLR about a year and a half ago, maybe a year and a quarter ago. And it's just one of those deals that the way that I like to do these hobbies is I just have such a focus. Like if I'm not doing pens or if I'm not hanging out with the family, a lot of times my break away from the shop and my fun hobby is photography. And I'm on forums, I'm learning as much as I can, and I really enjoy it, especially HDR photography. And it's scary though, because this type of focus is what turns pens into a career. So I've got to, like, do I want to be a photographer? No, I'm stick with pens. I'm way too, the success rate with pens is way too good to ever say, oh yeah, now I'm going to be a photographer. Besides, I think photographers are kind of a dime a dozen right now anyways. The technology for DSLRs are impressive. I think it makes a much better hobby than trying to actually make a living from it. But
well, perhaps you could become the world's most sought after pen photographer.
Hey, now that's and I think you and I discussed this earlier. One thing that I will make some plans for is to do a good tutorial on pen photography. I think that's two things that maybe I can, two things that I can bring together. And eventually on my website, maybe I'll put together a nice video blog that would show how I approach pen photography. It's really not that difficult. It's really just a matter of lighting, having a good light tent, and you don't need an expensive camera. But I digress. I could probably cover that with a good blog post someday.
Oh, well, I would appreciate that because it's something I'm very interested in. I do like to photograph my pens, and probably everybody who collects fountain pens would like to photograph them too. I was just trying yesterday to photograph a Wall all-metal sterling silver pen, and I tell you, I had the hardest time figuring out where I could stand myself and the camera without getting a reflection in that pen. An all-metal pen is just a challenge, put it that way.
You got to make yourself a light tent, and the only thing that's going to the only thing that should be around that pen, except for white cloth, is going to be your lens sticking through a hole.
That's basically what I did. Basically what I did, but since I knew the setup, I could still see a little tiny reflection of that lens in the section of the pen is a curved piece, of course, and so it'll just pick up anything.
Here's the trick then. You take some like white cardboard or white poster board, super glue it to a dowel rod, and then what you're going to do is you're just going to stick that what is basically like a bounce card or a reflector card, and you're going to stick that in your light tent and figure out where that reflection is happening and use that bounce card or that reflector card to cancel it out. That's what it'll take.
See, you should have been here last night when I was trying to photograph that pen. Yes, please do make that tutorial. I'm sure it'll be very popular. Everybody I talk to that likes fountain pens also likes to photograph them, and it's really product photography. Small product photography is very difficult. I suppose it isn't once you have everything set up, once you know the ins and outs. But if you have to figure them out by yourself, it's very difficult.
Well, I don't think it's difficult, but I think it's a matter of making or buying a good tent, having good lighting, and lighting is probably the key. And then also, don't be afraid to use a cheap point and shoot. Honestly, you can get great photos with tabletop photography. You don't have to have a DSLR. I mean, I think that, even decent point and shoots today are getting up into very, very high resolution. So obviously, with pen photography, you're not going for like amazing depth of field. So you don't need an f1.8, 28 millimeter lens. It's not necessary as long as it's getting everything in focus and it's a good quality camera. Nothing at all wrong with point and shoots. So, you can make a light tent for $20. You can spend, let's say, $75 or so on good lights to come in on the sides, and then just have a good way to mount your camera.
And I know we're really talking about photography now, but do you recommend 2 lights or 3 lights for that light tent?
I use 2.
You use 2?
I use 2. Yep. There wouldn't be anything wrong with 3, but I'm also kind of space conscious in my shop, and I've got so much room to put lights in, and right now my light tent is on like a stand and the lights are on the side. If I got more efficient, maybe I would make it more of like a tabletop so it wouldn't take up so much floor space. But yeah, I use 2 lights. I find that if you get into like 4, 5, 6 lights, you need to have a little bit of shadow and a little bit of definition. And I've seen some pen photography where people are shining literally like 6 lights on the pen to get rid of every shadow. And I personally don't like that, because you just end up with a flat image. It just doesn't look three-dimensional at all. Right. I think that 2 lights are just fine, maybe 3, and then you still have some definition, still a little bit of shadow that's giving you like a 3-dimensional look to the pen.
Well, if you grab a camera, we can just turn this one into your blog post, your tutorial. I do want to mention, though, you posted recently. You posted photographs. I think they were of a hotel, and I believe the story was you left your father-in-law in the car so you could run in and take pictures of this hotel, and those are HDR photos. Yeah.
Well, actually, if we're talking about the same one, that was the Philadelphia Sheraton where the Philly Pen Show was.
No, I think I'm talking about something prior to that. I think it might have been where you spent your honeymoon.
I'm sorry, my wife is reminding me. What was it? Oh, Numerical. Yes. Yeah. That's and if anyone's interested, my photography blog is briangrayphotography.blogspot.com. I think it's .com. Yeah, briangrayphotography.blogspot. So I'm doing HDR photography, which means high dynamic range. And without getting too far into I'll try and explain it quickly. Essentially, like, your eye will process, they say, like 11 to 13 stops of exposure. And by stops of exposure, that means that your eye and your brain can process a very wide range of brightness and darkness at the same time. Now, a typical DSLR camera, or any type of camera, can only process or interpret about 5 stops of exposure. So in other words, your brain and your eye is able to interpret about double, or if not more than double, the brightness and the darkness as what a typical camera will. So what I do with HDR photography, high dynamic range, is I try and represent the entire spectrum of brights and darks in the same photo. This is what Ansel Adams tried so hard to do a long time ago, but without this technology, he did a great job with what he had. But essentially what I'll do is I'll take usually 5 photographs. 5. Sorry, did I say 5 photographs?
You said 5, yeah. And we all noticed, too.
Yeah, I'm glad I caught that. So anyways, I'll take 5 photographs, and each photograph will go from dark to middle of the range to high range. So a really dark photograph, and then a little brighter, and then real bright and super bright. And what that does is that takes the entire range of exposure or brightness and condenses it into one photo. So this software that I have will take the bright highlights and also the darks and put them all together. So the theory is that it represents better what your eye truly sees than what a DSLR camera or a point and shoot camera can do with its limited range of exposure. That's kind of the concept. So if you want to take a look at those photos, that's kind of my side project is photography. But yeah.
Right, and I'll definitely have a link up to that, to your blog, your photography blog, in the show notes for this interview, because I think those are absolutely stunning photographs. And I do hear people say that HDR photographs appear to be overprocessed. Or hot, I guess. I don't know what the slang is for that, but I don't think so at all. I think when my eyes look at those, they're just stunningly beautiful, and that's what my eye would see, I suppose, if I was standing in that hotel. So why not give me a picture that represents what my eye would see?
Yeah. Here's what happens, though, is that, and I was guilty of this, especially at the beginning when people start doing HDR, they're so fascinated with how this software will allow them to really make a hyper-realistic photo. And so all too often, people do what we call overcooking the photo. And basically what that means is instead of making it look realistic, they kind of take it way out of control. So, colors are way oversaturated. And, this software notoriously will take clouds and make them really, really dramatic and incredibly black and dark. Well, if you look outside, though, you never see black clouds and a blue sky really hardly ever together. So when this software does that, it makes it look overcooked. So a lot of what I've been learning the last, I would say, 3 or 4 months, or maybe 5 or 6 months, is how to take what this software does, which usually overcooks it, usually makes it hyper-realistic, and taking it into Photoshop and kind of bringing the more natural elements back into it. So it truly does look like what your eye and what your brain processed, instead of a super realistic or a hyper-realistic interpretation that doesn't look like reality at all. So hopefully what I'm doing is somewhere between, what a DSLR camera is capable of and what, the other end of the spectrum is this hyper-realism, and hopefully I'm right in the middle trying to mimic what our eyes actually see. That's the goal, anyways, with HDR photography.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job. I think the photographs are stunning, and maybe we can take some photos when we're both in LA at the Pen Show next month. Or this month, actually. Your interview is going to hit this Friday, so it'll already be February, so this month.
The show is sneaking up on me already, isn't it?
You're ready, though, aren't you?
No.
Well, you just published a video today with an update of your inventory, your current inventory. It seems like you have some pens to bring to Los Angeles.
Definitely. The good thing about the Philly show being so close to the LA show is that, of course, we went to the Philly show with around 250 pens. And I think right now in inventory we have like probably 225, 220. So it's not like we have 2 weeks to make 80 pens or something like that. Of course not. And I don't think that we can handle that kind of volume anyways. So the good thing about those shows being close to each other is that a lot of the Philly inventory is going to come with us to LA, and it's already done, and we don't have to really break our backs to make a bunch of pens for that show. The downside is those pen shows really take a lot out of us. At least a week of preparation before the show, usually 2 days of recovery after the show just because we're completely exhausted. And then when you put 2 of those in a row, not only does it really wear us down, but it also makes my backlog longer. Like usually it takes me 2, 3, 4 weeks to get a custom pen out. But right now I'm about 6 weeks because these shows are back to back, and it just takes up a lot of our time.
And so, yes, we do have to talk about fountain pens since I'm sitting here talking with Mr. Edison Pen himself. But before we jump right into the Edison Pen Company, what were you doing before Edison Pen Company? Obviously, you had a hobby of wood turning. It turned into making pens, but you had a career of some sort. Where'd you come from, Brian?
Yeah, actually, of all things, I got my degree in music performance and music education. Well, I should say trumpet performance. I got my degree basically in trumpet and music education. And I was either going to go on to graduate school and teach trumpet at a college level, or I was going to be a band director. And I'm certainly not putting down the band director pathway. I'm actually putting it up. I knew that I didn't have the patience to deal with 100 fifth graders, and they're all holding noisemakers, because trust me, nothing beautiful comes out of those instruments at that age. So I think I got the education portion of the degree because it wasn't that much more classes and credits to get both degrees. And it probably would make me more marketable to get a better, to get a job outside of music if I needed to. And that's actually what happened. So at the time, I was accepted to Eastman, to Indiana, and North Texas. And then I thought to myself, well, my professor at that time, he was, I'm guessing, 32, 33, with a doctorate, struggling to get his kids out of an apartment, And I thought, man, if there's other avenues, I can try it, and I can always go back to graduate school anytime, right? So I interviewed for positions in pharmaceutical sales, and I got one with Merck. And I did that for 13, 14 years, I believe. And I loved the job. It was great, except for the last 4 years. And if you remember, around this time, which would have been, maybe, 10 years ago. It's scary. It might have been that long ago. Around 10 years ago, you might remember when Vioxx was pulled from the market, that pain medication that Merck had. Okay, when Vioxx happened, everything just went to hell with Merck. And it was just a slow transition of everything being awful for us. And it seemed like the sales reps really was bearing the brunt. So the last 3 years of Merck, I went through 3 layoffs, and it was awful. I was stressed. I was medicated to get through my day. I probably wasn't the greatest husband or father. And at this time, I already had a small pen business. Back, early on, it was actually called Pencraft. The Edison Pen Company did not come about until I really started getting a lot more serious about pens. So right about the time that this 3rd layoff happened, and I'm stressed out of my mind, I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to give this pen thing a try. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is I'm just going to go back and interview for another job that I'll hate, Right. That's the worst thing that can happen. So let's give this a shot. And at first, it was really just kind of like, maybe it'll just keep me off of unemployment. Who knows? Maybe it'll actually work. Good things happen when you spend 8 or 12 hours a day at something versus 8 or 12 hours a week at something. Just good things happen. And it took off. And that was, I'm going to guess, 4 or 5 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. And things have grown exponentially as well.
And we're all glad everything took off. Now, when did Edison Pen Company actually come about? You were already selling pens by then, and decided you had to make things more official, or?
Yeah, essentially, I'll bring you back a little farther, even, and I'll take the Merck and the pharmaceutical sales thing out of the equation. I always enjoyed woodworking. And I loved building furniture, and that kind of grew into Marquetry Furniture, which I absolutely adored. I loved doing Marquetry Furniture. I traveled to California to study with Paul Schursch. I went to the East Coast to study with a guy named Silas Kopp, who was just phenomenal, as well as Julie Godfrey, who is his apprentice. I'm sorry, did you want to jump in?
Yes, can you define Marquetry Furniture for me?
Marquetry Furniture is basically, it's similar to inlay, but not quite. If you want an example of this, the best way to sum it up is to go to Silas Kopp, silaskopf.com. And this is a guy that I studied with. It's essentially taking pieces of veneer, flat pieces of wood, and you basically assemble them like a puzzle to make a picture. Well, for instance, I've got a piece that I did right here. I don't know if you can actually see this or not, but this is a wine cabinet that I did a long time ago. I'm sorry, there's a reflection. But I think you can see that those are small pieces of veneer that are all put together.
We can see that.
And, you know, there's probably a couple hundred little individual pieces that are assembled together to make that flower pattern. And if I go from a distance, you can see that it is a wine cabinet.
Wow. Okay. Marquetry Furniture. Yes, I'm going to hit that website, and I'll even have that website up at your interview page so people can go there too. So you came to California and you were studying that.
Yes, and among some others. And I also had a lathe. I enjoyed wood turning and making, you know, wooden bowls and stuff like that. And then along with wood turning, you can make kit pens. You know, you have a wood lathe and you buy all the components, and you turn some wooden barrels or plastic barrels, and you put, you know, the parts together to make a pen. And I really enjoyed that. And that's really, kit pens is what got me into fountain pens, period. Because I can make a really neat roller ball, but what about these fountain pens? These are really cool. So once I started with the kit pens, that's really what got me into fountain pens, period. Now, the nibs that come with those kit pens are generally pretty awful. So I didn't know really what a good nib was. They were Taiwanese, even Indian made. And I thought, fountain pens aren't for me. This is awful. And then my wife and I were on a vacation in Vegas, and we went to a Edison Pen Company, and I bought a Pilot Vanishing Point, and I bought a Lamy Studio Palladium. And from then on out, I was like, okay, this is what a nib is supposed to be like, and this is what a fountain pen is supposed to be like. And once I saw those pens, I'm like, man, you know what? I wonder if I can get beyond these kits, because really, kits to me were always limiting. They're heavy, they're big, they're clunky, and it's also very, very difficult to make something that's different than any of the other thousands of weekend warriors that are also making pens from kits as well.
Right.
So kind of like, you know, earlier I mentioned that when I get into something, I kind of have this focus, and I have this laser focus to stay completely on task, and really I want to accomplish it. I decided that if I'm not going to continue making pens unless I can manufacture my own parts. And that's really what got me into where I am today, is the decision to get away from having a kit where I buy 80% of the parts, make a couple of barrels and put it together and call it my pen. I would rather manufacture all of my parts, you know, with the exception of the nib and the clip and perhaps the feed, of course. And that's really what got this started. And going from a woodworking background, understand that pen making really is more machining than anything. It's really, you need machining skills and you need machinists training more so than woodworking. So I really got myself expanded to a completely other trade, which is machining. Woodworking and machining are totally different. And I think that's one of the reasons that you see there's not too many kit makers that really successfully make a transition over to a pen that they completely make on their own. Now, there are some guys out there that have made the transition just like I have in making great pens. But for some reason, there's this divide between the two. And it seems like, you know, rarely is there crossing back and forth. The woodworkers stay woodworkers. And, you know, once the guys that cross over become much better machinists, they kind of stay over there as well. So that's really how it all started. And, you know, learning how to cut multiple lead threads. That's really the difference between, not just multiple, but cutting threads in general. That's essentially the difference between a kit pen and a pen that is manufactured completely from scratch, is that, you know, when you get a kit pen, all your threads are made for you. That's the real difficulty. That's the big jumping point. That's the big hurdle, is learning how to create your own threads and make them match and make them mate and make them efficient. You know, that was the big thing that literally took me a year or even longer to master, was just cutting good threads. That's what's difficult.
So the threads are the little piece that's the most tricky. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're making kit pens, and you're even selling some of them. Is that correct? And you decide...
And back then, craft. Yeah, I'm sorry.
What were you saying?
Back then, I was called Pencraft.
Pencraft was, you were making kit pens and selling them under the name Pencraft. And at some point you decided you were going to start making your own pens.
Exactly.
Well, except for the nib and except for the feed. Yes.
Well, I made the transition a little bit gradually because I went from kit pens to kit pens that didn't look like kit pens. So what I would do is I would take the thread components and only use those two parts instead of all the other parts that came with it. And I would put that together and make a pen. So it didn't look like a kit pen, but technically it was because I still wasn't cutting those threads. And that's kind of what started selling pens that were more unique than what other kit makers were doing. That was the Beaumont and the Menlo. Those were really the first two pens that were successful for me. And then once that started to take off, the Pearl and the Herald came about. And then I thought, okay, I don't like the name Pencraft. It kind of speaks a little bit too like craft shows, craft fairs, wood pens. I haven't touched a wood lathe and I haven't touched wood as a material for years now because it's just not it's just not a viable material for me. So once I started to figure out how to do my own threads, that's when the Herald came about. That's when the Pearl came about. Then the Menlo and the Beaumont were retired because I didn't want to make any pens that didn't have my own components on it.
That makes sense. So what was the first material you started using?
Well, acrylics, obviously. Yeah, I mean, I would say that probably 90% of what we make is, I know that many pen companies like to call it a resin, and let's please not get into the precious resin story there. But, you know, I'm not a big fan of saying that my pens are Italian resin or any type of resin. I don't really know what resin means. They're acrylics, and they're beautiful acrylics. If you want to get technical, they're plastic. You know, they really are.
That's what I thought, and I was going to ask you that question.
Exactly. So, you know, mostly, I would say 90% acrylics. There's a good chunk of ebonite. You know, I would say maybe 80% acrylics, and then like a 10% ebonite. Then the other 10% would be like celluloid, cellulose acetate, and very little else. Every so often I've done something out of like buffalo horn or a more natural product.
Well, you're talking, you know, present day, correct?
Present day, correct.
What about in the beginning, though? What you decided you were going to make kit pens that weren't really kit pens, and you're going to make your own barrels and just use the thread part from the kit pen. What material did you start with?
Those were acrylic and ebonite.
And to do those, you had to leave your wood lathe and get something else. It's also called a lathe, though, isn't it? It's
called a metal lathe. Lathe. So, like a wood lathe is where you've got a piece spinning and you're holding a tool that you turn the wood with, right? A metal lathe has a tool rest, and the rest holds a tool, and then you control that with dials. So as opposed to using your hand to make precision cuts, you've got dials that you can get accurate down to a tenth of a thousandth of an inch, depending upon the accuracy of the machine.
Wow. So this is the machine that I have seen in action when you have, I'm not even sure if you still do that, you have your live cam going in the shop when you were making pens?
Yeah, I don't do that anymore, except by appointment. It turned into be more of a hassle than what it was worth. And here's what happened was a lot of times the whole point of doing that webcam was so that my clients could watch me make their pens and make real-time adjustments. Like, Brian, I like a concave section, but I want it to have a little bit of a flare at the end. And literally they could watch me make it and approve it as I made it. And that was a great feature. But then it turned into a thing where other pen makers were tuning in, and people would want me to teach them what I'm doing, you know. So then I'd see on some forums that, how do you cut a multiple lead thread? Well, here's how Brian Gray does it. I saw him on his website. Now, I don't mind sharing stuff like that, but the webcam grew into something where it was mostly other pen makers and people interested in education and how-to, more so than my clients being able to make real-time adjustments. So I still do that from time to time, but it's by appointment.
By appointment. But that is a metal lathe that I saw you using. I've had, just so everybody knows, I have two of your pens. Both of them were custom pearl pens. And I watched both of them being made because you told me when you were going to do it, and I tuned in and watched. And so that's a metal lathe that you use.
Correct. And I remember you have a Pearl made out of antique marble acrylic, but it's custom altered so that the seam is dead center in the middle and the ends are rounded, so it just looks like a solid round stick, correct?
Exactly. And
I remember.
I have two of those. Well, two different materials, but the same shape. I like the first one so much that I just had to have. Well, I can't pass your table at a pen show without being stuck there and buying something, but I suppose that's a common story. So you had to learn. It can't be the same to work with acrylic as it is with wood. I mean, from somebody who doesn't know anything about it, I would think, oh, they're completely different material. How does this work?
Well, first of all, you can't thread wood. I take it back. You can, but you have to make a very, very coarse thread. Like if you look at wood threads that exist, they might be like 4 TPI. In other words, 4 teeth per inch. The threads that I need to make are like 36 TPI. Wow. Even the densest wood out there is not going to take the threads that I need to cut. The grain will tear out. It just won't work. Now, it's possible to take a piece of wood and then attach some acrylic to it and then cut the threads in the acrylic. But I'll be honest, I've never found a way to make one like that that really looks good. And the other thing is, to be quite honest, how often do you see high-end pen makers using wood anyways? It's not a real common material. And whenever they do, like I know that I'm trying to think of, oh geez, what company makes that pen that has like the cross hat pattern? I guess that the point is, though, that not only is it very difficult to thread, and it doesn't really work for my designs, but also whenever pens that do have wood incorporated into them, they still resemble kit pens in a little way. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's kind of what I departed from and what I want to avoid. So generally, like literally, there has not been a speck of sawdust in my shop for years. Wow. It's all like ebonite celluloid. I just have no ambition to make pens from wood, not only because it can't thread, but it's also just a real difficult material for me to work with from a machining standpoint. You know, I'm not woodworking, I'm machining, right. You know?
And was that a big jump as far as learning, or did all the skills you have as a woodworker translate over into what you could use on the metal lathe?
Yeah, remember earlier I said it probably took me a good year or so to really make a good quadruple lead 36 TPI or 32 TPI or a triple lead thread that is 30 TPI. It's not easy. It's very difficult because if you think about it, you know, single lead threads, which just means there's one opening and it threads on there just like a nut and a bolt, okay? On pens, between the barrel and the section, generally what you want to do is you want to make a multiple lead thread. And what that means is there's actually 4 threads coming together. Even though it doesn't look like it, there's 4 threads that are evenly spaced from each other. Now, imagine the mathematics that it takes to figure out exactly the distance to make the first lead versus the second lead versus the third and the fourth. There's so much math involved with that. It really took me a very, very long time to learn how to do that on a manual lathe. And that was the skill that really was my launching pad, was making great threads. That's what's difficult.
And you mentioned manual lathes, so that makes me believe there are computer-aided lathes.
Yes, and I have both. I'll freely admit, you know, I do have what's called a CNC lathe. But you'll find that, so essentially, like the CNC lathe will cut threads for me that might have taken me a half hour, and I can get it done in like 5 minutes or so. But then, so essentially, I'll use the CNC lathe for what it's best at, doing the same thing precisely over and over and over and over. But then I'll go to the manual lathe to do the finesse work, like the final sanding and polishing and even some shaping as well. So it's a good combination between the two. You really can't automate sanding. you have to do some sanding and polishing. It has to be manually done. So yes, there is, some computer-controlled machinery in my shop. Without it, there's no way that I could do a production line. Every pen that I make will see a little bit of the computer-operated machine and also a good amount of the manual machine as well. It's a good marriage between the two. And I kind of use the CNC for what it's best at, which is precision and repetition. The type of stuff that would make me blow my brains out if I had to do that all day and make 20 finials, and get those threads down every time.
Okay, so you've moved away from kit pens, and you're now actually making your own threads. You've been working on that for a year. Yes. But
okay, you're not talking present time.
No,
you're talking.
I'm talking
7 or so years ago. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
And so now you've spent a year learning how to make these threads, and you're doing a really, really good job at it. Where are you selling your pens? Where did you start that?
It's all online. It's all social media. If it wasn't for the internet, if it wasn't for social media, I don't think that I would exist. I've sold one pen locally and then one other pen that's maybe 40 minutes away. That's the closest clients that I have really locally to me. So imagine trying to run this business brick and mortar in a local area. Of course it's not going to happen. Something as eccentric as custom fountain pens is only going to exist on the internet, and it's only going to thrive with social media and, making sure, I've got, thousands of subscribers to my blog. I've got, I think, in the ballpark of like 600 or 700 on my Facebook, and I've got a couple hundred here in my tweets and Twitter and all that. And between all of that, I think I can reach easily several thousand people with a couple of keystrokes when I put out my video blogs or my announcements and all that. How do you beat that? How else can you run a business? Without the internet, without social media, it just wouldn't happen.
So how long ago did Edison Pen Company actually begin?
Oh, geez. I'm going to guess like 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
So help me remember, 6 years ago. Did we have Twitter?
Well, that's a great question. I had my website. I had my blog. I did not do Facebook at the time. There was no Google.
Everybody was MySpacing then. Or I don't know. YouTube is only 6 years old, and it seems like it's been around forever.
Yeah, well, you have a really good point, because when I launched it, it was my website, and my brother, actually, who does web design, helped me with the website, and he said, and this is how long ago it was, he said, Brian, okay, this is the way that you got to set up your website, because there's this new thing called a blog. And you definitely got to use this on your website. That's how you'll keep people interactive. Instead of a stagnant website that just every so often has a new product come up, you need this blog down the middle so that people can get constant updates from you.
Right, and keep them interested in coming back to see what you've got.
So I'm guessing like 6 or so years ago, because that's when the concept of a blog was brand new. And then, of course, after that, things happened with everything else that was social media. But yes, you're very good point. At the beginning, it was my website and the blog, which is on the website, and that was it. So right. The social media thing came later.
Although you were being your own spokesperson, you were out in the forums and saying hello, and you had probably been in the forums for quite some time by then.
That's a great point that I completely forgot about. If you think about it, really, the Fountain Pen Network, Pen Trace, Fountain Pen Geeks, your little site, all these are, I would include those in social media. And absolutely, when my business started, I think I can credit those forums for a lot of the success of my business, and I have to thank them for, doing what they do. I know that moderating forums is not an easy thing to do, and I wouldn't want the job. But yeah, absolutely, that's a great point. Besides just my website, probably the best thing that helped me early on was word of mouth on the forums. I just got this new Edison pen, and wow, does it write cool, and he was very attentive, and he's got great customer service. Check him out. Someone would write a review, and then someone else would buy a pen, and then someone would write a review of that. And if you look on the Fountain Pen Network now, I think there's somewhere like 70 or 75 reviews of Edison pens. I'm guessing, I'm going off memory. But whenever I go on there, the list is getting longer and longer with all the reviews. So yes, I should definitely give credit to the forums, without a doubt.
Right, and that's really word of mouth. I mean, there's no actual face-to-face, except in pen shows, but a forum really is word of mouth advertising, and people say great things about your pens, and I know that for a fact. I'll share this with you now, because I don't think I've told you before. Last year I had to go to Mexico for 5 months, and I couldn't take all my pens with me. I couldn't. I had to set a limit, and I set my limit at 3. So I had to go through all my pens and decide which 3 pens are the ones I can't live without for 5 months. And of the 3, 2 of them were yours.
All right, that's okay. I'm to hear that.
They are the ones that are always at the ready, and you make great pens. Now, how many pens do you think you've made? Total.
Oh, geez. How many pens have I made total?
Total. Just, it's a guesstimate, but go ahead.
It's... Oh, my gosh. I know that I do have, like, a running... the invoices that I write, they're on a numbered system, okay? And without telling you exactly which invoice I'm on right now, because I don't even know, I would guess that on the custom level, probably somewhere in the range of probably like 2,500 custom pens. And then on the production level, probably not as many, because I've been doing production only for about a year, but it's catching up fast. It's catching up really fast. So if I were going to give you a ballpark estimate, 3,500 pens. How's that?
3,500 pens.
Those are custom, but the production is probably going to overweigh that very, very quickly here in the next year or so, my guess.
Amazing. Oh, see, to me, that's a lot of pens. Now, I didn't catch that at all. What did you say?
Wouldn't it be neat if somehow they could all be in the same room, and I could need just to see, like, wall to wall, the pens that I've made. Can all the owners come back and just have an event at Edison, and we'll meet at the shop, and I'll see all the old pens I've made?
How many owners are we talking about?
Well, 3,000, I suppose.
Well, I've got 2, so...
All right.
I get 2 passes. So how does a company... This is probably way on tangent, but you've been making pens for years, and fantastic pens. How does a company like Mont Blanc make... How many? I forget whether it was 10,000 or 20,000 of the Hemingways. How do they produce that many pens? It's all mass production? It's a machine just spits them out? What?
I can't speak for any specific company, but I can tell you that there's a big difference between a pen that is turned out of a solid block of acrylic and a pen that is made with an injection molding. I'm not saying that Mont Blanc does that. I don't know. I don't know.
How else are you going to make 10,000 pens?
Exactly. I mean, if you take a look at like a plastic Bic, they're not taking a piece of plastic and boring it out and turning it to the right diameter. They're injection molding. They're doing injection molding. So the simple answer to that is, at the Edison Pen Company, we have 3 full-time employees, including myself. And, our typical production, and I know what that range is, maybe a company like Mont Blanc has the equivalent of 20 Edison Pen crews, doing their own thing or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, you can get that production up there. Automated machinery will do a lot. And then the next thing to consider is, injection molding. That's very, very fast. Instead of making a barrel in 5 minutes, you make a barrel when you just press it together, throw the plastic in, and cool it and pop it out.
Finished.
But well, I mean, for the most part, yeah.
Still need some cleaning, though.
Trust me, I'm no expert on injection molding. That's way beyond. I don't think I'll ever get into that.
Right, and we probably have to clarify that we're not accusing Mont Blanc of doing it. We're just we're trying to guess how you can make 10,000 or 20,000 pens quickly, and that's based on our limited experience, that's what we think you'd have to do.
Well, but even so, if you think about a production CNC lathe that really works on a high production scale, much faster than mine, a lathe like that could probably put out 60 or 70 pens a day, and if you've got 12 of those running, there's your answer. I mean, okay. Give it 3 or 4 months, and you'll be up in those numbers.
So when are you going to get to that level?
I don't know. Things are going. I'm not going to rule it out.
How big is your shop, approximately?
We've got 1,000 square foot downstairs and 600 square foot upstairs.
And is it big enough?
No, we're getting cramped. Actually, Friday and today we did a lot of reorganization because we're starting to run out of room with stuff that we need. So my wife and our employee Wendy were primarily doing lots of reorganization today while I was working on some other things, and then Friday they also did a great job with that. It's so amazing. I'm just working away and I turn around and like the shop's clean. Whoa, wow. That's really, things are organized. I didn't touch a thing. That's amazing.
So since I have you here, let's ask a question that probably lots of people want to know. You have all the tools available to you and all the materials. How do you sit down and decide a design for a pen?
Well,
no trade secrets. Just, how does this basically happen?
There's no secret. I mean, honestly, think about it. How many original designs are there?
Well, I've heard that there's no original thought, so.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what I'll do is at a pen show, I will start riffling through some of the scrap tables or the tables that just have like miscellaneous junk parts. And I'll take a look at how vintage pens were made. And I'll, with those scrap pens and those junker pens, it's not a tragedy to cut it open to see how they did the center band. Tear it apart to see what their pitch of their threads were, anything like that. How did these guys make this pen a long time ago? And that's really a source for inspiration, absolutely. And then sometimes I'll take the qualities of one pen that I really like and kind of marry it with something else that I really like and put it together and make this design. And then sometimes it doesn't work at all. I've got a drawer out in the shop of designs that will never see the light of day because I don't want someone to see it because, quite honestly, it was a piece of junk. And it was a good idea when I started, and then by the time it became a real pen, I'm just like, man, aesthetically, this is just off. And maybe I never find it. Maybe I never figured out what was off about it. And maybe I'll go back to that drawer and figure it out someday. But for now, there is a drawer out there that I don't want people opening. Just stay out of that one. And you don't have to see that stuff.
So you use older pens, vintage pens. You get your examples for ideas from real life. Do you sit down and draw pens?
Generally, here's what I do when it comes to the design process. I'll have an idea in my head. I'm really, in spite of, I do have pretty advanced computer skills, but I'm really not that good with computer-aided design. If I did that, I would take so much time to learn the programs, and I'm really not that good at it. So I'll get an idea in my head, and I'll figure that, okay, I kind of like this shape. I'll kind of make a drawing, and I'll do it somewhat to scale and get an idea for what I want. But then for the most part, what I will do is I'll go and make the pen completely manually. I'll shape it with a file. I'll do everything by eye. And I've got this idea in my head, and it's almost, literally, it's almost like a potter creating a piece of pottery, except my potter's wheel goes in this direction instead of that direction, right? So I'll shape it, and I'll see what I like about it and what I don't like about it. And, okay, maybe I took off too much here. Let's start over. Okay, let's try this design. So I'll make it completely from scratch, see what I like about it, see what I don't like about it, incorporate these different styles and shapes. And then when I got what I like, okay, here's my prototype. And then I'll figure out how to make that on a larger scale.
All right.
And just go from there. And that's the design. Most of it is what I have in my head, what I see in my eye, and trying to get that translated manually to the shape of the pen.
So when I say that you're an artist, it really is true.
You know what? I'll take that. Sure. Yeah.
Because you're usually bashful about that when I tell you you're an artist. Oh, no. But now you just admitted it. So let me take one particular pen, for example, the Mina, which is an unusual. It's the one I really want to see at the LA Pen Show. Not that I didn't see it last year. Where does this idea come from? Did you just put a piece of material in a lathe and say, oh, let's do this and that, and come up with this very interesting shape? Or did somebody give you the idea? What happened?
I have a confession on the Mina. I did not design the Mina. Ernest Shin with Hakumin Urushi designed the Mina. Ernest is a real big fan of smaller pens. He feels that most of my designs, at least, well, with the exception of the last 4 or 5 months, because I've been coming out with more and more smaller pens, Ernest has always felt that my pens are too large. And if he's watching this right now, he's probably never said this to me out loud, but I know that's what he thinks. You know what I mean? So actually, Ernest came to me and said, why don't we make some pens? And you know that Ernest and I collaborate on the Urushi stuff. For people that don't know, Edison pens can be made in a Urushi setting by Ernest Shin, a phenomenal. Now, if you're calling me an artist, then this is a guy he's got to be 6 artist levels above me. And he said, I've got this idea. And the funny thing is, the first thing that he sent to me was that shape. And I said, that is cool. I think it's very Asian. It's very minimal. I like the dimensions. It has a little bit of a flair to it, but not enough to where it's really ostentatious. And I prototyped it. He liked it. And I said, Ernest, let's make this a pen. And he said, absolutely. Give me some that I can do in a Urushi format. And that's how the Mina came about.
And how did we get 2 sizes of it? Because you wanted the larger one and he wanted the smaller one?
That's an interesting story, too. When the first prototype of the Mina had a relatively short cap, but a longer barrel. And I looked at it and I thought, proportionally, that's just off. It doesn't look right. Sometimes when I'm designing, I'll keep a little, not to say that this pen follows it, but I kind of think in thirds, and I think sometimes along the golden ratio or the golden mean, if people understand what that is. And this pen initially went kind of by that golden mean. The seam between the cap and the barrel, initially, I made the barrel longer, and when it came out, I thought, man, this just doesn't look that good. It really doesn't. So I took the shorter cap, made a shorter barrel, put it together, and I thought, all right, that's a great proportion. But then I've got this long barrel sitting in my drawer. Let's make a long cap for that too and keep the same proportions. And so originally the Mina really was not a well-proportioned aesthetically well-proportioned pen. The original design, my first crack at it, wasn't that good. I didn't like where that center seam was. And then the 2 sizes just evolved because I had a long barrel on hand. So let's make a long cap and see if that works too. And we were also thinking that maybe, the Mina would be more feminine and the extended Mina might be more masculine. But in all honesty, I'm 5'11" with, normal size hands for a guy my size. And the Mina fits well in my hand. I think the extended Mina was just, I just liked it. It was good. And why not offer 2 versions?
Now, is the extended Mina cap without the cap still longer than the standard Mina without the cap?
Correct.
Or it's not just the cap that's longer?
In the extended Mina versus the standard Mina, the cap and the barrel is longer on both. So it's basically keeping the same proportions, just stretching it out. And
the seam where the cap meets the barrel when it's closed, is that right in the middle?
It's not right in the middle. It's off by a little bit, keeping the same proportion as the other pen. The barrel is a touch longer.
So you beat me to the punch. I did want to ask you about Urushi. When did you start with that, and how did that happen?
Fountain Pen Network, probably about, I'm going to guess 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. I saw this guy post some work, and I was like, man, he had I think it was a Schaefer touchdown, and he did some phenomenal work on that. And I found out his name was Ernest. I sent him a private message on the Fountain Pen Network. I said, I don't know if you've heard of me, but man, you've got my interest. You're making some neat stuff. Tell me more about you. We got on the phone. We spoke. Turned out, at that time, Ernest was 22 or so, and now he's 23, 24. Really, he's just phenomenal in his abilities. He, contrary to what most people think, he is Asian, but he's actually Korean. He's not Japanese. He doesn't speak Japanese. He doesn't, I'm sorry, I take it back. I believe that he does speak more and more Japanese because he's been taking classes. But most of his Urushi training has been getting books in Japanese on Urushi and then translating to learn his techniques. It's really been phenomenal. I think I can say this authoritatively. I don't think there's any Urushi artist in North America except for Ernest that's working on pens. I did hear that there might be someone up in Canada, but I don't know anything about it. So the actual Urushi technique, which I can't speak as an authority on, I really can't say this, with confidence. It's just, talking to Ernest. Actually obtaining that knowledge is difficult if you don't speak Japanese, and that's why there really aren't a lot of Urushi artists in North America at all. So I feel very fortunate to have met up with him. I showed him what I was all about. He put some trust in me, and I put some trust in him that, he put some trust in me that these pens would actually sell and that I could move the volume for him. I put some trust in him that he would make a great product, and it worked out wonderfully. We started with the Pearl Urushi project, which was a huge success. We announced it without even showing the pen. I mean, we showed what the technique would be. We showed that it would be on the Pearl, and literally we sold, I think we sold 14 or 15 in the first couple of weeks, and then the rest went within the next 3 or 4 weeks. It was phenomenal. And then we still had 4 months to make this pen. So that was a huge success. After that, we did the Herald Urushi project, and right now we're working on the Mina Urushi project. Now, besides these limited editions, we also do custom work, and plenty of it as well. You don't need to wait for a limited edition to get an Edison /Hakumin Urushi Kobo pen. You can always call us up and say, hey, I like the Pearl, and I'd like it to be in this Urushi treatment, and let's talk. And it's been a great, wonderful relationship working with Ernest on that.
That does sound. Now, I didn't know you could get those custom too. How long does that take?
Depends on the technique, and again, I might be misspeaking because, a lot of times if someone comes to me and says, hey, I want a Urushi pen, then I send them straight to Ernest. And I really am not involved except for when Ernest calls me up and says, okay, I need a Pearl in this dimension with this specifications, and then I send it off to him. So I can't speak as an authority, but I think the minimum time would be a month or 2. The maximum time, depending upon if it's like incredibly complex maki or something along those lines. I honestly, I guess I can't speak as an authority on that. Minimum time a month or 2 months. Typical time is probably 4 months or 5 months, depending upon the technique and what's involved. If there's radon, if there's application of gold, and then if that's reduced down to bring it through and all that. I'm not a Urushi expert. I leave that up to Ernest. But, expect at least 2 months. How's that?
At least 2 months, minimum.
Yeah. But again, if Ernest is watching, he's probably going, what?
No, that's not talking about. That's not right. Let me get Eric on the phone. So now let's go back in time one more time. So we're doing a time machine thing here. You're making your own pens, and you're doing the social media that's available at the time, and the 2 pens, your first 2 pens were the Pearl and the
Herald.
Those were the first 2, what we're going to call Edison pens.
Yeah.
And they're both still with you, and they're both still popular.
Yeah, very.
And how many materials are you using right now? I mean, I know you're using acrylics and ebonite mostly, but the different designs in those materials. How many do you have right now, different designs? Because I have been to your materials smug mug and to your materials page at your website, but I didn't count how many you have there. And I mean, I did notice you have 3 trays of material samples that you take to shows.
Yeah. Now, are you asking how many materials can you choose from if you want to come to Edison and have a custom-made pen, or are you asking
how many different designs of the materials do you work with right now, as opposed to when you first started?
Well, okay, I did bring like a case with just like some pens. Huron Grande, Harold Grande, Morgan, Pearl, Glenmont, Huron, Collier, Harold, Mina, Extended Mina, Pearlette, and my wife is here, and maybe she'll think of something else. The Edison Nouveau Premier, the Del Coronado, the Stillwell, and there's a production pen that I'm forgetting. I said Collier. Hudson, that's the one I'm thinking of, the Hudson. I think that covers all of it. But
those are the different makes of pens, or different, what do you call them?
Yeah,
models of pens.
Yeah.
But when you first started making pens, and you started with acrylics, how many different designs in acrylic did you have to work with? Because right now you seem to have a huge number of designs, patterns. I'm not sure if I'm using the right vocabulary.
I suppose that when I first started, I didn't have the same palette available to me, if that's what you're meaning.
See, you are an artist.
Yeah, thank you. But, yeah, I mean, there are suppliers of acrylics out there. You know, when I first started, I probably had 2 or 3 suppliers that I could get, you know, stuff from. And, you know, I had a couple hundred different things at my disposal. And Howard Levy at Bexley Pen has been wonderful and a great friend and has helped me a lot. So, you know, he's generous with materials as well. But today, you know, I have, I don't know, 7 or 8 different sources from all over the world and different places to find what I want. That's one of the nice things about what I can do and what I can offer the pen community is that instead of having, you know, I'd like to have this pen, but geez, this company only offers it in 3 materials. Literally, if somebody comes to me and says, sends me a picture, I'm looking for this plastic, I'm looking for this acrylic, can you make a pen out of it? Most of the time I can find it. You know, I've built those connections with all the acrylic manufacturers and distributors and retailers and other pen makers and other pen companies where I can usually find whatever I want. So to say, I mean, like in my materials samples gallery, there's well over 200 materials to look at there, but still that scratches the surface, which kind of blows my mind sometimes because I have trouble keeping track of the name. Somebody will call me up and say, I want a pearl in strawberry ice acrylic. I'm like, what the hell is strawberry ice? Look that up. Okay, all right, I know what that is. Okay, all right, I can make that pen.
Strawberry ice acrylic.
Yeah, that is an acrylic that we use that I like. I didn't make up that name.
I was going to check too because I thought you had.
Right.
And so you start with whatever materials you could get at the time when you started making pens to now you apparently you can get any material that you want. And you said something within reason. You said something besides acrylic and besides ebonite. What else can you work with, or have you worked with?
Acrylic, ebonite, nitrous celluloid, cellulose acetate, although it's difficult to find, and really those are kind of the primary. I mean, there's a material called Bakelite that's like a very old plastic. It really makes great pens, but it's difficult to find stuff that isn't too brittle. The more translucent Bakelite is, the more brittle it is. But unfortunately, the more translucent, the more beautiful as well. So, yeah, I mean, for the most part, just celluloids, ebonites, acrylics. I mean, really, what else is there to go with right now as far as pen materials go? Unless you're getting into something exotic, like some kind of natural horn or, I don't know, what else could be used. Basically everything except for metals. I'm not using like any type of metal as the pen body. Now, of course, you'll see some center bands out of the Edison Pen Company, and you'll see some overlays as far as metal goes, but the base material being metal usually doesn't lend itself to my technique of machining.
And of the materials that you do use, which is your favorite to work with, if you have a favorite?
It changes all the time,
really?
I think. You know, yeah, absolutely. You know, honestly, I'm not joking here. I would say up until about maybe 3 or 4 months ago, one of my all-time favorites is that antique marble that you have in your modified pearl. I do have there's one that I've really liked a lot, and this is a collier made from it, and this camera will not do it justice. I call this pearlized wine, and the reason that I like this so much is I've never seen an acrylic that has this much depth. The only way to really appreciate this is to see it live or maybe an HD video camera, because when you photograph this, you don't really see how deep that is. But it's almost like you can get lost in this. This is a really nice burgundy. This would be one of my favorites right now, for sure. And usually anything tortoise I always like, too. There's lots of tortoises to choose from.
And if you had to use something that wasn't an Edison pen, what would your choice be? Do you collect pens? Or does the pen maker not collect pens?
I do collect pens. Now, I don't have a vast collection, and when I go to a pen show, I don't drop $500 on my own collection. Honestly, I really have a lot of affection for Bexley pens. That's probably the majority of my collection. And maybe I'm a little biased because, you know, Howard Levy with the Bexley Pen Company is only 2 hours from me. And every so often I go down and visit. And to be honest with you, I probably owe him a heck of a lot. Because keep in mind that when my business started, there really wasn't any good way to get gold nibs without buying literally 600 of them. Okay, so where does someone like me get gold nibs? Well, Howard was generous enough. If you remember, maybe some people might remember when Pencraft started, I didn't have my own nib. If you wanted a gold nib, I bought a Bexley nib and put it on it. Very generous. I mean, imagine allowing someone to take your brand and put it on their pen. So I definitely owe Howard a lot. And he's also been very open with me about information, about, geez, Howard, I'm having trouble doing this. How can you help me out? I owe him a lot. He's a great guy, very generous and open with information. And maybe I'm biased because I like him so much. I also like his pens so much. My favorite pen that I own right now is a 2007 Bexley Owners Club, which, if you remember what that is, that's the one that is made out of ebonite, and it has all those gold rings to make it to simulate bamboo. It's actually a very small pen, but it has literally like 36 individual parts. It's a phenomenal feat of engineering. It's really that's probably my favorite pen that I have right now that stays in the case, and I don't necessarily take it out and play with it that often because I love it so much.
And okay, so Bexley is a favorite pen aside from Edison pens. What about a favorite color ink? You don't even have to tell me the brand. Just, do you have a color that you like?
You know, honestly, I'm not an ink expert.
No, but you must have an opinion.
Well, here's the thing. Now, I do every so often get some samples from the Goulets. You know, the Goulet Pen Company, they have their ink drop. I'm very good friends with Brian and Rachel. They're very dear friends of ours, and we have a great business relationship as well. And every so often, they'll send me some samples to try out, and I love trying out the samples. But there's a reason that I'm really not that well versed on inks, and the reason is that when I'm testing people's pens before I ship them, I'm always going to use Waterman Florida Blue. Waterman Florida Blue. And the reason is because I know it's a good all-around ink. It's a nice color blue. But if someone calls me up a year from now and says, Brian, I've got a problem with this nib. It's not really writing the way that it used to, and something's gone wrong. Can you help me out with this? I don't want to go back and think to myself, okay, when I tuned that pen and when I tested it, what ink was I using? You know what I mean? I've got to keep that consistent because I can't think to myself, okay, in 2010, my favorite ink was Noodler's whatever, and in 2009, my favorite ink was Private Reserve whatever, you know, or J.R. Bond. So I keep my ink selection basically to Waterman Florida Blue because when I'm testing pens, I can always consistently remember, and it's never an issue for me to remember what ink I was testing that pen with. It's always Waterman Florida Blue. That's been, you know, it's just been an ink that I've liked from the beginning, and I've never taken major steps to deviate away from it because I don't want to forget what ink I used when I was testing someone's pen.
Okay. I can understand that, and I agree with it. Waterman Florida Blue is actually one of my favorites too. But let me ask the question a different way. In your favorite pen, the Bexley Owners Club, what ink is in it?
Waterman Havana, just because the brown. The brown.
You do like to match the ink to your pen.
I did in that case, yes. And interestingly enough, you might be shocked, or some people might be surprised, that pen actually has a steel nib on it. When people ask my opinion on steel versus gold nib, I almost always recommend steel. Give it a try, and then if you don't care for it, then we'll go to gold. But 95% of my customers are perfectly happy with the steel. So I really don't do a lot with flexible nibs, and I don't do a lot with you know, flex nibs at all. Really, my wife loves flex nibs, and for Christmas I got her a beautiful E. Faber with a needle point super flex. They're really cool. But I mean, bottom line is that I put a steel nib with a 1.1 cursive italic on that pen. I'm perfectly happy with it, and I managed to sell the gold nib for $100. So, do you think it's blasphemy to have a $400 Bexley and put a steel nib on it? Well, oh.
Well, no. I mean, I can't say it's blasphemy, and I do know your opinion on steel nibs. You say if you don't need flex, go with a steel nib. That's basically your philosophy. And
yeah. There's an article on my website that covers the topic exhaustively. But yeah, I mean, there's steel nibs out there that are cheap and awful. And they come from Taiwan, they come from India, they come from China. And sometimes people lump all steel nibs into that poor category when really, German-made steel nibs are, I think, awesome. And they can be tuned just as well as a gold nib. The difference is, the metal behind the iridium. If you think about it, the iridium, even though it's not iridium, we won't get into that discussion because that's a long discussion.
Not tonight, anyway.
Yeah, the iridium, the part that touches the paper, is the same on a gold nib and steel nib. So the smoothness can also be the same. The difference is the metal behind it, and the metal behind it on a gold nib is going to allow that to flex. If flex means nothing for you, then you're spending $100 or $200 extra dollars on a pen. That maybe you really don't need that. Now, not every pen company offers a steel nib option or a gold nib option, but I see it more and more. And the reason is because the price of gold is just so ridiculous right now that as pen makers, we need to have like $100 to a $200 differential between our gold nib and our steel nib offerings, even though they're the same pen. We're getting killed by the price of gold. So I do see a trend more and more of pen companies either offering a steel nib option on a pen or, more and more steel nibs, less and less gold nibs.
And I'm not sure most people know this, but I think of you also as a nib meister because you know nibs and you work with nibs and you tune nibs and you do everything that can be done to nibs. So while I have you here, I want to ask you a question that I thought up last week and couldn't find an answer to. I didn't actually find it. Didn't even go looking because I knew I would get you on the phone. Has anybody ever? Yeah. Does anybody make now, or has anybody ever made silver nibs?
I think that silver would be way too soft of a metal.
That's the reason. It's just too soft a metal.
Now, I'm not a metallurgist. I'm not a genius. I'm not an expert on this. But I'm next to positive that like if you take a look at a sterling silver clip or anything that's sterling silver, you can bend it, right? A nib has to be, a gold nib especially, has to be able to flex. The tines need to be able to flex and then return to a non-flexed state. If you don't do that, then the nib is worthless because the first time you write with it, it'll just be a gusher. It won't hold back. So I don't think that sterling silver or any type of silver is a viable medium as a nib material at all because it's too soft. That's my guess. I'm not a genius, or I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in that field at all.
Well, that was my guess as well because if it were an option, there would be stainless steel. There would be silver nibs available out there. Yeah. You wouldn't have to go from either steel to gold. You could put silver in the middle. And you sell nibs. Can I touch on your website for nib sales?
Yeah. I run a completely separate business called Meisternibs, and essentially what that is I'm the U.S. distributor for Yovo nibs. So that's basically it. When I started in the whole pen thing, one of the biggest obstacles I faced, as I said, was how do I buy gold nibs without having to buy 600 and literally. I won't tell you how much that investment is, but trust me, it's monstrous if you really want to buy 600 steel nibs. So I looked into various companies and I liked Yovo the best. And I realized they didn't have any U.S. representation. And so I started offering, here's who I am, here's what I do. I'm young, I'm ambitious. I would love to, check out your nibs. And let's talk about maybe I can help you distribute these in the U.S. And that's how that came about.
And how's that going?
Very good. Yeah, very nice. I can't complain about it at all. And obviously, it doesn't take up much of my time. Edison is my bread and butter, but it's nice to have that connection. And every so often, people need some nibs, and they come to me for those nibs, which is, it was. I took some initiative early on to get that set up, and it's a little small business basically on top of Edison, which is nice.
Now, who's a typical person that would come to Meisternibs for nibs?
Other pen makers.
Other pen makers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I mean, if you take a look at U.S. pen makers, some of them are coming through me, some of them are not. It's, it just depends. Mostly smaller accounts, I'm not going to handle a monster account through that little business. They'll probably go direct to Germany, but yeah.
Oh, good. I've never actually purchased a nib from Meisternibs. I've only gone to you.
Well, and it's one and the same, anyways. Right. Really. Yeah.
So you've had a couple of announcements recently about new pens, and one was, I don't know if it was announced just before, at, or just after the Philly show. What's that pen?
Are you referring to the Pearlette?
Yes.
Yeah, the Pearlette, and I like I said, I did bring these here. The Pearlette is essentially a smaller version of the Pearl. Here's a clipped version, and I know my webcam won't do this justice, and a clipless version. Essentially, with the Pearlette, we were thinking smaller, and also making sure that there's no nib in this. I rarely put nibs on the pens until they're ready to sell. But in my hand, it's really not too small, and that's what I was aiming for. But for people with larger hands, it also posts really well too. So you know what, I do have a nib right here, so you can at least see it with a nib in it.
Is this the smallest pen you make?
At this point, yes. Here's the Mina next to it, and I think they're proportionate in length, but the Mina is going to be thicker overall.
And that's the standard Mina.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Which is the largest pen you make?
Probably the Harold Grande or the Huron Grande, and I have a Huron Grande right here, and here's the Pearlette.
Yeah, that's a nice size comparison.
Yeah, and it really is. It's a large pen in my hand, or I think anyone's hand.
And what do you know the length of it off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, I really don't. Capped, it's well over 6 inches. I know that it's got a 6.5 or 7. I'm guessing.
Wow.
I don't have a ruler here with me, but it's on the website.
Right, it's on the website.
Yep.
And but that's not the newest pen you've announced.
No.
Do you have one of those?
I do. It's called the Del Coronado. And now, you know that I do a collaboration with Ernest Shin on Urushi work. I also do a collaboration with a guy who's actually a good personal friend of mine. His name is Dan Furlano. And he is also a very talented pen maker. He's always kind of been in the pen world woodwork, if you will, and that he never really wanted to get too busy with pens to where he was neglecting his full-time job. So he and I kind of worked, like he did the overlay for the Stillwell. But when we launched the Stillwell, he really didn't want to be immediately credited with it in case, he's just swamped with these people that want to do similar things. But now I think that he wants to be more recognized, and so we are sharing that this is the collaboration. It's the Stillwell, another overlay pen similar to the I'm sorry, did I say Stillwell? I meant Del Coronado. And it's similar to the Stillwell in that it's both an overlay pen, but this is an enclosed overlay. See if I can get that glare off of there.
Right, which I thought was really beautiful and an outstanding feature of that Del Coronado.
Yeah, thank you.
And you will have that. You will have that in Los Angeles for me to hold, right?
Absolutely. And what I really like about this, you've probably seen on the website, is that you're not going to see it on this web camera, but there's a little teeny tiny thread that's barely visible right there. And this thread catches way up high in the barrel, and it threads onto the barrel for posting.
And how is the balance when it's posted?
That's what I really like about it, because a lot of my pens, when you post them, they don't post always as deep as what I would like, but we purposely made this to post very deep so that it is, I can't get a good angle here, so that it is very well balanced in your hand. It doesn't stick out too far. Actually, I usually don't post my pens. This one I definitely post. It really is a great feel and a very good balance when it's posted.
I'll have to try that in Los Angeles because I'm like you. I usually don't post and I'm used to that now. I started out not posting because I didn't want to hurt the pens, because you can get those little marks on the barrel, and so that has translated into my hand being more accustomed to not posting, the balance of a pen that is not posted. But the way, obviously, posting this pen is not going to cause any damage. It's designed with posting in mind. And
Absolutely.
no, in both right now in this video and in the video that I've seen of the Del Coronado, I haven't been able to see that thread at the end of the barrel that you are twisting it onto. So I'm gonna have to wait till I see that pen in real life to actually verify that there is a thread there.
Yeah, that's how subtle it really is. It basically just looks like a little tiny lip on the end, and essentially what makes it a thread, it's a little heavier on one side, a little lighter on the other side. Otherwise, it just looks like a little tiny ring on the end. Really ingenious. I mean, not to pat myself and Dan on the back, but it really is a cool setup.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'm afraid I might like it too much when I see it in person. What else is coming up for this year? Because today is the end of January, and we've still got 11 months to go in this year. What's new with Edison? What can we expect from Edison Pen Company?
There will be something new that will be exclusive to the Goulets. We're not ready to say much about it yet, but I think that people will be really, really ecstatic with it. It's got some things on it that Edison Pen Company has never done before. So take a look, and I'm pretty sure I'll have a prototype that might be finished this week, and then we'll start making materials decisions, we'll start making trim decisions, and then maybe, within 2 or 3 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have this ready for consumption. So within a month, I would like to think you'll see this new pen up on the Goulet website, and personally, I'm really, really proud of how it's looking and how it's coming together so far. It's going to be, I think, one of my personal achievements where I kind of pat myself on the back, like, hey, that's a damn good pen. Nice job, buddy. Right. So I'm looking forward.
When you're putting the final touches on it, is there going to be another window of time where public comment is requested? Which color is best for that, or what shape is the best for this, or any sort of input?
I can't speak for the Goulets, but we have done that in the past, and I don't see why we would or would not do it in the future. The only risk with that is that every so often, like you offer an option that you think is off the wall, and everybody goes for it, and now you're confused. It's like, well, will it sell or will it not? Is it really a good idea? So sometimes the off the wall ideas really go great. With the Goulets and I, we did the Edison Nouveau Premier. And Brian picked a color, Rachel picked a color, and I picked a color. We offered those 3. Rachel picked the cappuccino swirl, Brian picked the cobalt, and I picked the black satin. And I didn't think the cappuccino would sell that well. The cappuccino has sold more than the other 2 combined. And guess which one was dead last? My black satin finish was dead last as far as the numbers go. So I don't know if I can always trust myself as to what really will sell or not, but
yeah, I don't know if I'd be very good at pen designing, because I only design for what I like. I wouldn't be designing for what is everybody else going to like, because most of the time I don't care. And beyond that, any big plans or?
I do have plans for a piston filler, and this will be a impressive pen. It's going to be a piston filler where the reservoir is actually integral to the mechanism itself. Yes, go ahead.
Can I order mine now? I don't care anything. The only thing I care about is that you're going to put a piston filler in it, because I've been asking you for one of those for years.
Actually, I did. The Edison Pen Company had a piston filler.
I can't get my hands on one. It was a limited edition, and nobody's letting theirs go.
It was a limited edition, but I wasn't totally ecstatic with the amount of labor that went into really making it work well. The piston mechanism wasn't as reliable as what I wanted, and sometimes it took me 3 versions. I had to make it 3 times to get one right. So it was an experiment. It went okay, and the pens that are out there are all working, and they're functional, and they're great, no problems. But from my end, getting it to that perfect state was very difficult. This new mechanism that I have is going to alleviate that, and I'm going to feel a lot better. And I'm also not going to waste time getting the product out like I did with the first one. That was a learning experience for me. I really want to make a piston filler, and I probably got it over my head at that point. So with this new mechanism, it's going to be nice. And the mechanism is all brass and glass. It'll be a departure for me, not only as an integral piston filler, but also it's going to be a heavier Edison pen simply because of the mechanism itself. Most of my pens are like 18 grams or so, if not less. This mechanism alone might be a good 25, 35 grams. So it'll be a heavier Edison pen than an integral piston filler that I'm looking forward to. But I have no idea what the timeline is like. This will have a lot more engineering involved than what my typical pens do. So it might be like spring, summer before this is really coming together.
But most likely this year.
Yes. Oh, trust me, my goal is this year. I just need to get a lot of these other designs under my belt, get some free time away from, just basically I need to get these other designs finished and then move on to the next one, which is that piston filler. I do have an idea for a pen that will incorporate a huge number 8 nib.
Really?
Yeah.
Will it also have a piston filler?
I can't do well, I don't think I can do a piston filler on that. But the only downside, though, is that it's only a gold version, and these nibs, they come to me with an ebonite feed, and they're awfully expensive. So it won't be a cheap pen. The nib alone is ridiculous because it's a huge hunk of 18 karat gold, and it has a nice ebonite feed, which, manufacturing that alone is difficult. So it won't be a cheap pen, but I just need to figure out a good design to put around this big honking nib, and that hopefully will happen this year as well.
So you're just going to continue making pens that I absolutely have to have. That's what you're saying.
That's what you, everybody else. That's the plan.
Now, going back to the piston filler for just a moment, the mechanism, the piston filling mechanism that you have found, is this going to be another one that is you can only get 100 of them and that's it? Because I think that was the problem before, is that you just couldn't get any more. That
was part of it with the first one. This one, I've got an unlimited supply.
Unlimited supply.
It won't be a limited edition. Maybe I'll do like a limited edition out of a special ebonite or special celluloid. But my plan with this pen is to make it a complete, it'll be a new Edison pen. And as long as everything goes as planned, it'll be, a piston filler that'll be around for as long as I want to produce it.
Fantastic. And beyond this year? Where's Edison Pen Company going? When you fall asleep at night, just before you fall asleep, and you're thinking about Edison Pen Company, where do you want it in? Where do you want it in 10 years?
Usually, I'm just thinking about what the hell I'm doing. I can't put my finger on what's happening next year. I don't even know what this piston filler is going to look like, let alone 2014. But no,
daydreams. Daydreams.
Probably. I'd like to think that the production line will keep growing as well. I really enjoy doing both the production line and the signature line. We have a full-time employee. My wife is out there full-time, and myself. And sometimes we're working on these projects and we're pulling our hair out because there's not enough time in the day. So maybe a larger space someday, maybe another employee, maybe more machinery. Maybe things just start growing. But a lot of people have said, some people have said to me, or I've seen it on the forums, like, geez, I really hope that the Edison Pen Company doesn't all of a sudden turn into a production pen company and everything is, you can't choose your colors and it's all lesser expensive and it's all production. And I don't think that'll ever happen. There's always going to be a custom side to this business, without a doubt, because honestly, when we're doing the production pens, it's like, okay, we just made 25 finials. Okay, we just made 25 caps. It's the same thing over and over, and it's repetitive, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but I love the variety. I love it when someone calls me up and says, hey, Brian, I've got an idea. And I'm like, okay, let's talk. All right. Well, what do you want to do? Because I want the challenge. I want to make something new, and I want to figure out. A lot of times what has made me a much better pen maker is when someone calls me up and says, I like what you've done here, but I want to alter this. How can we do it? And suddenly taking these custom requests and taking these custom ideas where many times some of my inspiration doesn't come from this brain. It comes from my client's brain who wants to do a certain thing with the pen. and maybe their design is excellent. For instance, the collier, I really didn't design. That was a client that said, I like the number 76, but I want to change the lines a little bit. Can you do this? And I said, man, that's awesome. I think that's a great design. And then we just kind of, I gave him a free pen or two as a thank you, if you don't mind if I launch this. And he was perfectly happy. That was great, you know? So, I digress though, I don't remember where I was going with this.
I have completely forgotten my question. Oh, yeah. Where are you going to be in 10 years? I think we were trying to get there.
So I guess that I kind of went off on a tangent there. I apologize. You know, what I was saying was that I don't think I'll ever lose sight of the custom side, because it's too rewarding and it makes me a much better pen maker to take on these challenges and figure out how to make someone's custom request a reality. And it just shows me and reveals to me many more opportunities and ways of finding new strategies for pen design, you know. And without that, if I was just doing the same pen over and over and over, I don't know that I really would feel that I would get necessarily better. I think that having the custom aspect makes me a better pen maker faster, for sure. And I love it when someone calls me up and says, hey, I really want to try this. Let's give it a shot.
So, but it keeps everything interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with having a production line, but if that's the only thing you're doing, then you're going to get a burnout, especially as an artist who needs to design pens. So when I approach you in Los Angeles and say, I've got an idea, you'll be fine with that.
Well, we'll discuss it.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes someone's idea is they want a pen that is like, you know, 1.5 inches in diameter. And with monstrous threads, and I want you to make it for $100. I'm kidding. I don't get that, but yeah, I mean, everything within reason. Every so often, someone comes to me with a custom request, and I need to kind of talk them away from their idea because I've got a feeling that aesthetically it's going to be off. And you know, I'm more than willing to follow orders, if you will. I don't want to use the word follow orders, but you know what I mean. To take their idea and make their perfect pen. I have no problem with that. But I'll usually try and throw in my 2 cents as to what aesthetically I feel will really work well in that situation.
Right, and that makes sense. You've got lots of experience in this area.
Yeah.
And before we wrap things up, what have I forgotten to ask you? What kind of a question do you usually get all the time that I just didn't come up with tonight?
Oh, geez, I don't know. You know, I guess I get such a wide range. I think we covered a lot. I don't think there's anything that I wanted to make sure that we covered that we didn't, you know.
Okay. There is one more. I've got one more. Yeah. You go to Philly, and I know you come to Los Angeles, and I've seen you in Chicago. How many pen shows do you do a year? Which ones are they?
Let me count them up. Beginning of the year, Philadelphia, LA. We should do Baltimore, but it's so close to Philly and LA that it makes it real difficult for us. Chicago, DC, the Ohio show, Toronto off and on. We you know, so 1 year won't do Toronto, 1 year we will do Toronto, and I think that's it. I don't know if I'm. Yeah, my wife is reminding me the New York City Pen Show, but that hasn't been running for the last couple years. We hope that turns back up, but we'll see. So yeah, generally, how many did I count off there? 5 or 6? You know, 5 or 6 shows a year. If we attended every show, I think we just pull our hair out. It's just too much.
Right, that would be way too much. But since you go to both Los Angeles and the Super Show, the Washington D.C. show, I hear lots of people say that Los Angeles is bigger, and lots of people say the D.C. show is bigger. I have not been to the D.C. show, so I can't say.
You know, I think that D.C. is bigger in size, but not by much. You know, as far as the number of exhibitors, I think that DC is a little bit bigger, but they're all different. You know, they all have their own little quirks and qualities. And, you know, LA is probably more of a modern show than a vintage show. Not to say there's not vintage pens there, but I think that modern pen companies are more prevalent there. And the DC show is a good mix of vintage and modern. The Ohio show is a huge vintage show. It's great, and not to say there's no modern dealers, but it's wonderful. Like the Ohio show is where I'm definitely scavenging for those pen parts that I mentioned earlier that I want to pick apart and figure out how they designed the pen. Well, what else? Philadelphia is a good mix of the two. And I think that Chicago is a pretty good mix of the two as well. So they all have their own qualities. But as far as size goes, I'm going to take a guess that DC is a little bigger when it comes to the number of exhibitors.
A little bigger.
But which, I mean, how do you quantify that?
Quantify that.
Yeah, they're all great.
Which one, in your opinion, has the most visitors, attendees?
I would say DC by a small margin over LA.
Over Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty close. I live pretty close to a very good pen show.
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
And, you know, there is a San Francisco show that we haven't gone to yet, but we definitely need to consider it. When we consider pen shows, we have to consider how profitable they'll be. That's not our main motivation for deciding if we go to a show, but also, you know, expenses and travel comes into that. And whether or not, you know, for instance, if we did a show every month, I would never catch up on my custom backlog. Right. It would just keep growing and growing and growing. We couldn't do it.
You could travel. You could travel with your lathe.
Oh yeah, precisely. Yeah, it wouldn't cost much to ship a 1,500-pound machine, right?
That's what they have freight for, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and in Los Angeles, February this month, you'll bring your camera, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Good. Okay, well that's all I have for you, Mr. Gray.
Eric, it's been a real pleasure. I appreciate it. I like what you guys are doing with Fountain Pen Geeks. I mean the blogs are frequent. I love seeing you know, people that are really pushing the pen community with social media and really getting out there and doing some great things. And your forum is excellent. If anyone here is watching and hasn't been to the Fountain Pen Geeks forum, make sure you check that out, because I got a feeling that one's going to grow and be one of the biggest ones out there. And there's lots of good resources on your website. So it was an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm honored. Thank you so much. We went on for a long time, but I think we have some great content there.
It felt like only 5 minutes to me, and I don't have any way of seeing what time it is now that I've got you full screen. So it'll be a surprise to me how long we went. No, it was absolutely my pleasure to get you to sit down with me for however long it was and just talk about pens and everything else and who you are as an individual. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I know I always take up way too much of your time at pen shows, but I do try to move out of the way when a customer comes in. Not that I'm not a customer, but I know I do tend to just go on and on because you're so pleasant to talk to.
I've never felt that way at all, and usually I wonder if I'm talking too much, you know. So that's usually the case at the shows.
Well, hopefully, I don't know what your schedule is. I'll be at the show in Los Angeles all the days of the show, and I imagine you will be too. Are you arriving Wednesday or Thursday?
We'll be arriving on Thursday, and then we'll be set up Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I think we're flying out Monday morning.
Yeah, because that's the holiday.
I believe so.
Perhaps we can do dinner. In fact, we'll just make it a standing invitation.
That'll be great, Eric.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You have an excellent evening, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us for the Geek of the Week. Tune in next Friday at 10 a.m. right here at fpgeeks.com.